Welcome to SRA 221. In this video, we will be discussing access control models. Access control is any mechanism by which a system grants or revokes the right to access some data or perform some action. Normally, a user must first log into a system using some authentication system. There are two main types of access control: physical and logical. Physical access control limits access to campuses, buildings, rooms, and physical IT assets. Logical access limits connections to computer networks, system files, and data. The four main categories of access control are mandatory access control, discretionary access control, role-based access control, and rule-based access control. Access control systems perform authorization identification, authentication, access approval, and accountability of entities through login credentials, including passwords, personal identification numbers, PINs, biometric scans, and physical or electronic keys. Physical access control is utilizing physical barriers which can help prevent unauthorized users from accessing systems. It also allows authorized users to access systems keeping physical security in mind. This type of control includes keeping the computer secure by securing the door which provides access to the system using a paper access log, performing video surveillance with closed-circuit television, and, in extreme situations, having man-traps. Logical access control is done via access control lists, ACLs, group policies, passwords, and account restrictions. Access control lists are permissions attached to an object, i.e., spreadsheet file, that a system will check to allow or deny control to that object. These permissions range from full control to read-only to access denied. Group policies are part of the Windows environment and allow for centralized management of access control to a network of computers utilizing the directory services of Microsoft called Active Directory. This eliminates the need to go to each computer and configure access control. Passwords are the most common logical access control. Account restrictions are the last logical access control method in the list. The two most common account restrictions are time of day restrictions and account expiration. Mandatory access control, MAC, is a security strategy that restricts the ability individual resource owners have to grant or deny access to resource objects in a file system. MAC criteria are defined by the system administrator, strictly enforced by the operating system, OS, or security kernel, and are unable to be altered by end users. MAC is generally utilized in government and military facilities by assigning a classification label to each system file object. Each user will be given these characteristics as well, and when a person or device tries to access a specific resource, the OS or security kernel will check the entity's credentials to determine whether access will be granted. As the highest level of access control, MAC can be contrasted with lower-level discretionary access control, DAC, which allows individual resource owners to make their own policies and assign security controls. Discretionary access control, DAC, allows authorized users to change the access control attributes of objects, thereby specifying whether other users have access to the object. A simple form of discretionary access control, DAC, might be file passwords, where access to a file requires the knowledge of a password created by the file owner. In Linux, the file permission is the general form of discretionary access control, DAC. Discretionary access control, DAC, is the setting of permissions on files, folders, and shared resources. The owner of the object, normally the user who created the object, in most operating system OS environments, applies discretionary access controls. This ownership may be transferred or controlled by root administrator accounts. Discretionary access control, DAC, is controlled by the owner or root administrator of the operating system rather than being hard-coded into the system. The discretionary access control, DAC, mechanisms have a basic weakness, and that is they fail to recognize a fundamental difference between human users and computer programs. Role-based access control, RBAC, is a method of regulating access to computer or network resources based on the roles of individual users within an enterprise. In this context, access is the ability of an individual user to perform a specific task, such as view, create, or modify a file. Roles are defined according to job competency, authority, and responsibility within the enterprise. When using RBAC, user roles can be easily created, changed, or discontinued as organizational/enterprise needs evolve without impacting a mass user base.